If you haven't already done so, click on subscribe now and turn on notifications to get alerts when the next episode of The Black Ship is out. Now, on with the story. In a dark, ironic fashion, time that felt as if it never advanced before the assault on the Drazen forces was now constraining his throat, holding his neck in a powerful, restraining chokehold as minutes ebbed like seconds. Only 20 minutes had passed since the attack, and subsequent retreat with Drazen fighters and frigates steadily chasing him and his fellow pilots. However, in his mind, that time-lapse had been barely registered. The frigates were slower than the large contingent of fighters, but they showed no signs of giving up anytime soon. If the fighters caught up to them and forced them into a dogfight, the frigates would catch up only to deal the finishing blow to any unlucky survivor. The problem was clear in his mind. If they fought, they would be turned to shreds to the last fighter. Fleeing was the only solution, but a doomed one. Drazen fighters were, as always, less maneuverable than their Principality counterparts, but they were faster. But the fighters following them were different. Not in their design, but in their speed. They were much quicker than any he'd ever seen in the training chambers, and even the ones he encountered in gin tracks. Wyatt narrowed his eyes and let out a disgruntled growl as the reality slapped him across the face. Even if they used the afterburners to their breaking point, they wouldn't make it anywhere near the preset coordinates to meet up with the Nornavio. Worst of all, thanks to their jammers, their long-range sensors were useless, so he didn't know if more Drazen were coming behind the frigates. We can't fight them head-on, and we can't flee. Everyone is keeping quiet, but they must realize we're doomed if we don't do something. To make matters worse, we can't even scatter. They outnumber us 5-1 and can give chase to every single one of us easily. Come on, Wyatt, think! There has to be something I can do, Wyatt shouted in his mind as he gritted his teeth angrily. But what can I do? We lack the firepower to inflict any true damage, huh? Going down fighting seems like it's our only option, and those monsters know it. They're not even bothering to make use of their remaining missiles anymore. Eyes narrowed in defiance as the tactical display showcased how the Drazen pursuers were getting closer by the second. I reject that option, he spat with venom. If it were only him, he'd gladly put his life on the line, even die if that meant taking even just one last Drazen with him. But he wasn't alone. Redford had put 79 lives under his command, and most importantly, he'd promised Cynthia and Clara he'd come back. There has to be another route. There has to be, Wyatt muttered again. Telling himself that for the 20th time, he focused on thinking again, reviewing his options yet again, reliving his now numerous training sessions with his squad mates and his experience as a pilot. After another minute of thinking, he chuckled to himself. If only I had a few minds, I could try to lay a trap, but all I have are missiles. His muttering slowed down as he recalled the first real battle he had partaken in. Namely speaking, the trap set against the Black Ship cruiser. It wasn't the same, not by a long shot, but the spark of an idea formed in his mind and soon burrowed its roots deep, refusing to let go. It was a simple idea. What if he could replicate the rap on a much smaller scale? Opening a link to every fighter, he spoke. This is Composter 1. Everyone release a single active missile at my command, ready for remote detonation. As you command, Composter 1, replied Alpha 1, trying to hide the fear clogging his throat. Understood, Beta 1 complied. Omega 1, what are your intentions? Asked Gamma 1 somewhat nervously. We will comply, but we will need the missiles for the coming battle. He's right, Wyatt, Raquel interjected on their squadron channel. When those bastards catch up to us, we'll need them if we hope to have any chance at all. Does it matter? Nultar argued somberly. We'll be able to take down a few of them, if that, before they tear us apart in a straight-up fight. I'd rather go with whatever our squadron leader is thinking. I intend to find out if we can survive or not, Wyatt replied to both channels, silencing them. We have nothing to lose as we stand. Gamma Wedge is ready, Lieutenant, replied Gamma 1 a few seconds later alongside his fellow Wedge leaders. Wait for my command, said the heterochromatic pilot as he focused on the tactical display. After a minute of silence, he spoke up. Release, he said in a hushed tone, almost fearing the Drazen would hear him through the vacuum of space. At once, 80 smaller dots appeared on the screen directly on the path they had just passed through. They would be invisible to the Drazen as the missiles were not burning toward any objective. The wait felt both eternal and passed in the blink of an eye as the Drazen reached the impromptu minefield. "Now!" Wyatt shouted as he pressed the button that detonated his missile almost instantly. Simultaneously, the 80 missiles exploded amid the Drazen fighters. "Computer, how many enemy fighters are pursuing us?" he asked as he only saw a couple of red dots vanish from his display. 396 enemy fighters registered, 8 fewer than the previously registered record, the AI replied. "We are so dead," Leopold called out, his voice a mix of dread and nervous laughter. "That only took down 8 of them." "Thank you for stating the obvious, Dakar," Gregor added, also failing to mask the dread coating his words. Wyatt paid them little attention as he focused on something else. While he'd hoped for a more devastating result, the destruction of the Drazen outright wasn't his goal. He wasn't naive enough to believe mere missiles could compare with the destructive force a tactical mind could achieve. Whilst deadly and effective on unshielded targets, missiles were there more to overwhelm the PD capabilities of bigger ships, deplete shields, or deal a finishing blow on defenseless fighters, bombers, and gunships. It was the second purpose that he focused on this time. Much to his relief, while these fighters were faster, their shields remained the same. If anything, they were slightly weaker than standard. A wicked smile spread across his lips as ideas crossed his mind. "Check their shields readings," was his only command, while his attention was almost entirely focused on his machinations. Thanks to the jammers, their sensors were severely hampered, but at close ranges, even if they weren't entirely correct, their sensor readings revealed a particular truth. Only 8 fighters had been destroyed, but almost 100 fighters had suffered significant damage to their shields even if they were now slowly recovering them. "By the Prince, we should do it again! With their shields so heavily damaged, we're bound to take down at least a fifth of them," Leopold proposed. "That won't work. Look at their movements. Their formations spread out a little more to avoid another incident. That trick won't work again," Nultar countered. "Perhaps we should have used all 3 missiles," Raquel asked, uncertain. "And waste our missiles so recklessly?" Gregor replied, humming deeply. "Sir, what are we to do now?" Smiling, Wyatt replied, "I have an idea, but it will be risky. Nultar is correct. The Drazen will be ready if we try that again. That's why we're going to do it using our remaining missiles." He paused for a moment. "But Wyatt, you said it yourself. They'll be expecting that trap again," Nultar pointed out. "True, but only if we remain as we are. The Drazen believe themselves to be inherently superior to any other life form. They may be intelligent, but their arrogance is one of their greatest weaknesses. That's why we're going to turn off our engine thrusters," Wyatt explained. "We're going to what?" "Lieutenant, they are faster than us as it is. If we stop gaining speed, they'll close the distance quicker," Raquel protested. "She's right, Wyatt. We're going to fucking die if we do that," Leopold protested. "I would have liked to at least bet a beautiful woman before I got my ass killed. Can you please stop thinking about your damned carnal desires as we're about to face certain doom?" Gregor protested. "Not exactly how I pictured my end would be," Nultar added, unafraid. Eyes narrowing, Wyatt could understand their positions. Were the roles reversed, he too would be protesting or silently voicing his displeasure at the mention of a plan that sounded like certain death. Is this what command is really about? What Galt and Redford were trying to point out? To make decisions, to own them, and have others follow them? I'm not sure if I like this responsibility, but everyone depends on me as their commanding officer to achieve victory over our enemies and to return alive, Wyatt thought, and sighed tiredly. "As many as I can manage." "Sir?" Gregor asked, concerned, as the dispute among his squadron came to a halt. "Do you trust me?" Wyatt asked, then cleared his throat. "Ignore that question. Are you willing to trust me? All of you? You're our squadron leader and commanding officer, Wyatt. We have to—" Leopold began but was cut off by Wyatt. "Forget about that. Forget about rules and the chain of command. Will you trust me? Not merely as your commanding officer, but as a fellow pilot putting his life on the line like the rest of you?" Wyatt asked, and a silence fell between them for several seconds, until a chuckling Nultar cut through the silence. "For what is worth, Lieutenant? I'll follow your lead, not because I have nothing to lose, but because you've proven you're different compared to the usual stock. Give the order, sir, Noltar proclaimed firmly. Ha! I guess if I'm to die today, I'd rather die alongside a fellow commoner rather than serve as the shield for some petulant blue blood. Ah, what the hell. Count me in, sir, Leopold joined in with a raspy chuckle. You are a strange one, you know, Raquel said with a laugh. You defy everything I've considered normal until now, Lieutenant. Why should this be any different? I'll follow you, sir. While I don't share the same level of enthusiasm as the rest of our comrades, sir, I entrust my life unto your command, as it should be expected and as a personal gesture of trust. Guide us, sir, Gregor said lastly. Then this is what we will do, Wyatt said, his heart beating a little louder and faster in his chest after receiving their answers. First, we'll kill our engines. Then, we'll launch our remaining missiles in an unguided forward trajectory. After 2 minutes, we'll turn the missiles around and have them burn at full capacity to decelerate them until we move faster than them. Then, we'll remotely deactivate their thrusters, creating another minefield. While the missiles fly, we'll break our formations and begin to spread out in a grid. Everyone with me so far? Sir, if we break formation, that'll give the impression we're preparing to scatter, Gregor pointed out. Gregor is right. The Drazen have enough numbers to track us easily once we scatter, Leopold added. But we're not going to scatter, Wyatt said, and pregnant silence followed. We'll maintain that new grid formation to cover more space. That way, we won't be hitting ourselves. His smile widened until his teeth were on display. Once we're about to pass through the missiles, we'll deploy our flares in full. We'll be creating a sensor-baffling cloud the Drazen will have to pass through to get through us. Holy shit, Noltar muttered. You want to blind them to the missiles as we pass them? What if they just veer off and avoid it altogether? Raquel asked. They won't. The Drazen are stubborn bastards. They like to be as direct as possible in everything they do. Our leader is right about them. They're arrogant to a fault, Leopold added. The Drazen will be expecting a repeat of our previous tactic. I am more than happy to oblige, but in a different way. Once they pass through the baffling cloud, they'll reach the missiles after a few seconds. They won't detect them in time. We'll detonate them then. As he talked, Wyatt felt the pleasant fire in his stomach spread across his body. It felt nice and filled him with delight. I doubt that'll destroy many of them, Raquel protested initially. But I already said I'd follow you, sir, so I will. I'm not about to break my word. Good, Wyatt replied, satisfied. Because the missiles aren't there to destroy their fighters. A collective huh? Rumbled in his ears, making his already wide grin turn devilishly devious. Convincing the wedge leaders wasn't as easy, but after hearing the entirety of his plan, they agreed reluctantly to follow his orders, arguing that if it failed and they somehow survived, they would do everything in their power to report him and protest against his leadership position to Commander Redford. Wyatt agreed, knowing that if his plan failed, then they would be likely dead anyway. After a short discussion, he agreed to make a minor modification to his original plan. Taking advice from Beta 1, instead of killing their engines outright, they would instead lower them to minimal thrust, giving the impression that they were low on fuel, rather. The Drazen were unlikely to miss the chance to kill and capture them if they could. Second, as much as Wyatt wanted to tell the rest of the pilots about the plan, everyone, even Leopold, advised against it. There would be panic and several disgruntled voices among them. The probability of breaking apart for the sake of survival was already escalating by the minute. The last thing they needed was for their limited forces to be diminished even further and cause a complete rupture of command. Instead, they would obey their given orders under the pressure of his authority given directly by Commander Redford and, by extension, that of the Princess. The commoner pilots in their midst would obey regardless. It was the more self-serving nobles who were the root of such a predicament. Regardless of everything, with a goal set for everyone to reach, they began to move. The first step was taken, and the Drazen reacted almost instantly. Their formation tightened once more, and some of them launched a few missiles their way, detonating them halfway through as a precaution against encountering another undetected makeshift minefield. Then, as planned, they all launched their remaining missiles forward, unguided well beneath full propulsion. They would go slightly faster than the fighters themselves, enough to cover a few thousand kilometers before their thrusters would be disabled. Again, the Drazen reacted by spreading out, but when it was clear the missiles were not changing direction, their formations tightened again. Wyatt could only imagine their confusion, making him chuckle. At the 2-minute mark, the missiles deactivated their thrusters for a second, turned around completely, and their thrusters reignited at full force, rapidly slowing them down. Once the desired speed was reached, the missiles' thrusters were completely disabled, leaving their payload active but now silent, freely floating in space. "Break formation! Begin to spread and form a grid," he commanded, and slowly every wedge broke into their separate squadrons, and then the squadrons broke apart into individual fighters. Slowly but surely, in his tactical display, they all formed a semicircular grid barely larger than their previous tighter formation. It didn't need to be any bigger than that. All it had to do was to give each fighter ample space to make a quick maneuver without putting anyone else at risk, and most importantly, give the impression that they were getting ready to scatter. Again, the Drazen fighters spread their formations, each of them ready to pursue their claimed targets at a moment's notice. The message was loud and clear. None of them would escape their retribution. As they approached the missiles, Wyatt feared his plan would fail, and he'd get everyone under his command killed. It was a nauseating sensation, but one that brought him an odd sense of focus aside from the thrill of battle. Watching the 80 small green dots that made up his wing on the tactical display, Wyatt focused on them for what felt like an eternity, imagining their faces, their fear, their insecurity and dread. He made his decision right there and then, against his better judgment, and hesitant at first, he opened a channel with every pilot. He opened his mouth, not sure what he was going to say. So he allowed his mouth to move on its own. "This is Wyatt Staples. Before we continue, I wanted to tell all of you. I can't promise that all of us will come back alive. I can't promise that some of us will survive this, even if everything goes right. Likely, we're all about to die. All I can promise you is that I am doing everything in my power to ensure our survival and destroy those forsaken carrion feeders in the process. Fight on, sons and daughters of the Principality. Do your duty. Fight for the Prince, for the Principality. And if we are to die today, then let us burn as many Drazen as we can so that your families and countless innocents may live another day in peace." He took in a deep breath. "Loyalty is its own reward." "Loyalty is its own reward!" came a nearly unanimous chant after only a second of silence. He cut the channel a moment later, satisfied and with trembling hands that gripped his controllers tightly. He expected any of his squad mates to reply to his impromptu speech, but they either had nothing to say or chose to keep their thoughts to themselves. Either way, he couldn't spare more than a fleeting moment on such thoughts as the next part of the plan was about to happen. This was it, the decisive moment. Everything that followed would be decided in the coming seconds. Just as they were about to reach the missiles, Wyatt gave the command, "Release flares!" In but a second, every pilot deployed their flares, creating a sensor-baffling wall right in front of the Drazen fighters. Everyone held their breath for a second, but the Drazen, as hoped, pushed forth. They launched their remaining missiles as a volley, however, and they detonated amidst the baffling cloud, hoping to strike any potential trap there, but that was their mistake. The missiles, still moving through space, were well beyond the blast radius of their Drazen counterparts. Wyatt's wing passed through their missile field without problem, and just a few seconds later, the Drazen pursuers pushed through the remnants of the baffling cloud, unable to detect the trap set before them in time. Once the Drazen reached the second impromptu minefield, Wyatt gave the command, "Now!" Like before, he pressed a button and his 2 Hawk missiles exploded. 158 other explosions matched his own, their combined payload wreaking havoc amidst the Drazen fighters. On his display, only 2 red dots vanished. However, Wyatt wasn't paying attention to the potential destructive power of the missiles. He was only interested in the sensor readings of their shields. His eyes shone with pure, vicious, vindictive, murderous intent in an instant. "Kill your engines! Turn now!" came the command as he himself performed it. He felt the rapid and sudden turn, but compared to his stunt at Gintrax, this was nothing. It took only a split second to see his entire wing now facing their Drazen pursuers, their grid forming a cone with their twin-linked coil guns pointed straight at the corpse eaters. "Open fire!" Wyatt shouted, half laughing, half shouting. He didn't feel his fighter rattle as the coil guns fired a deadly barrage of magnetically accelerated metal. One barrage was joined by another and another until the sheer volume turned into a hail of fury and death directed at the Drazen fighters who were so eagerly pursuing them. Disoriented by the trap, but confident thanks to their numbers, they never saw their prey had turned around and had fired upon them until it was too late. With most of them suffering from depleted shields or severely drained, the concentrated hail of metal hit them in full. Through another screen, Wyatt watched with fascination as dozens of Drazen fighters were turned into scrap in the blink of an eye. Many of them exploded, some of them sending their debris colliding with another ship, damaging it or outright destroying it. It was a chain reaction of pure destruction and chaos that lasted no more than a few seconds, but that was more than enough. The Drazen broke their formations to avoid further damage, but they were now wounded, confused, and surprised. Wyatt's heart beat loudly, like a drum struck by a raging beast, as the 400 Drazen fighters were reduced to 127, with half of them damaged to some capacity. "Engage! Engage! Take to your formations! They still outnumber us! Protect each other and bring them down one by one! Focus on surviving, not killing as many as you can! We'll reduce them to scraps one fighter at a time before their frigates arrive! Composters with me!" Wyatt ordered as he was already moving to intercept a group of Drazen. Some Drazen were quicker to regain their senses than others, managing to form up, ready to engage their enemies. Half a minute later, the two sides clashed. Coil gunfire, quick laser bursts, and quick, swift maneuvers were the order of the day. From an outside perspective, it was pure chaos. But the dancers were professionals, and there was an organization to their movements that only they could fully understand. The numerically superior Drazen, once so sure of their victory, found themselves culled to nearly a fourth of their original strength and set against a more organized, fully shielded, and invigorated force of feed who had dared assault their precious home. Driven by righteous rage, the Drazen fought back with everything they had. Wyatt clenched his jaw tightly as he spun twice, finishing with a sharp turn to the left and firing a quick burst that killed a Drazen as the fighter exploded. Almost immediately, he used a short burst of his afterburner to position himself at the perfect angle right beneath a trio of Drazen fighters who were pursuing a lone fighter. Firing a controlled burst, most shots landed on the leading Drazen. Its weakened shields flared, then gave out, and the rest punctured it completely, eviscerating the pilot instantly. Unfortunately, the other two fighters were not dissuaded by the death of their comrade, and instead opened fire on their prey. Shields flickered, died, and a cry of terror was silenced when the fighter exploded. In revenge, Wyatt fired again, taking out another fighter on short notice, and before he could kill the third, the AI informed him that his shields were now at 82%. As he made a quick evasive maneuver, he saw Leopold coming behind him, quickly destroying the offender who had shot him. There was no time for words of gratitude as a group of 5 Drazen pounced upon a trio of fighters currently chasing 2 Drazen. "Nultar!" he ordered, barely having time to send the coordinates. He would have gone himself, but his squad mate was closer. Besides, he had spotted Raquel and Gregor dealing with a group of 7 Drazen. "On it!" Nultar called back, quickly moving to provide aid. To his fortune, 2 additional fighters from Omega Wedge joined him. With that aside, Wyatt moved to support his squad mates while Leopold engaged another Drazen in time to save another pilot. Moving quickly, he fired upon the Drazen at the back of the group. Its shields were nearly full, and his shots did nothing more than flicker them. Taking notice of him, 3 of the 7 Drazen disengaged and moved to intercept Wyatt. Wyatt's shield flickered again, but this time he took it intentionally as he took a sharp turn, fully outmaneuvering the Drazen trio even if darkness crawled at the edges of his vision from the momentary strain. It didn't matter. He had them where he wanted. Unleashing a full barrage of coil gun fire, 2 of the Drazen were turned into debris, whilst the third accelerated in an attempt to disengage him. The black-haired man allowed it, turning his attention back to Raquel and Gregor. They had dealt with 3 of their 4 remaining enemies, but in the heat of battle, another quartet of Drazen moved in to engage after tearing to shreds at least 2 other fighters. The quartet noticed his approach and, eager for an easier kill, turned to face him instead. With the aid of some well-placed shots and quick dodges, he depleted the shield of 2 of them just in time for Gregor and Raquel to move in behind them, ready to deliver the killing blow. Understandably, he was beyond puzzled when his squad mates instead fired at the other 2 Drazen. That momentary lapse in focus was paid in full when his shields were lowered to a 20% strength. Engulfed by the deadly rhythm of battle once more, he was quick to dispatch his original first 2 aggressors with a hail of fury before quickly evading a barrage of fire coming from the 2 remaining survivors. They were heavily damaged, but still living, showcased by a futile attempt at ramming him head-on. The distance was too great for them to do anything, and a quick burst from his coil guns silenced them forever. Analyzing the tactical display, he saw no more than 50 red dots moving away in a desperate attempt to disengage from the battle. There were nearly 30 stragglers left on the battlefield who were being destroyed one by one. The battle was over. It had lasted no more than a few minutes at most, but it was over. Releasing a breath he didn't know was being held back, Wyatt inspected the situation in more detail. It didn't take long to notice that the Drazen stragglers were being eliminated by squadron leaders, more prominently among them, Gamma 1. That's when he noticed that the other Drazen he thought Raquel and Gregor had eliminated were not dead, just crippled. Easy pickings and nothing more than target practice as they stumbled through space aimlessly. "Raquel! Gregor! What are you doing?" he asked as the satisfaction of having killed so many of his hated foes was dwarfed by a new type of rage. "Why did you not kill them? For that matter, what the hell were you thinking? You could have taken down 2 of those things, but you went for the others instead. I nearly lost my shields." "Sir, I apologize, but those were your kills. We had no right to take them," Gregor answered, confused. "Gregor is right, sir. They and the other stragglers are yours for the taking, as it should be. As it is your right," Raquel added, sharing in Gregor's confusion. "My right?" Wyatt muttered in utter astonishment. "What are you—" His words died in his throat when he saw a group of 3 fighters giving chase to the retreating. Opening a channel with them, he spoke in a heavy, demanding tone, his rage revived. "What do you think you're doing? Lambda 5, Sirius 2, Zeta 2, return to your formations immediately." "But sir, Lieutenant, we can still take down a few of them. Our ammunition storages are at 30% capacity," Sirius 1 replied. "I'm terribly sorry, Lieutenant Staples. I tried to stop them, but they heeded not my orders," Sirius 1 commanded. "Disengage immediately. The battle is over. We have our chance to flee. I repeat, I order you to break chase and return to your respective squadrons and formations," Wyatt ordered, putting more weight into his orders. "We're not cowards, sir. We can show our worth at last," replied Zeta 2. "You idiots!" Wyatt cried out in fury. "Once they notice you're isolated, they'll pounce on you. Turn back now!" Sirius 2 sighed tiredly. "It seems that a commoner will forever be a commoner. You know nothing of honor, Wyatt. Shit, half of them." Wyatt watched with futility as those 3 green dots were all but vanquished in a matter of seconds. The Drazen saw their chance and took it. For a moment, the force that annihilated the 3 idiots seemed to contemplate something, but whatever it was, they deemed it was unworthy of the risk and turned back, joining their accursed brethren. "Anyone else wants to join them? And why are those 4 still not destroyed? Kill them!" Wyatt protested, clenching his fists tightly. "They're your rightful kills, sir," Gregor repeated. "He's right, you know," Nultar joined in the conversation. "You'll get more accolades that way. Faster, too. It's how things are, Wyatt." "Oh, shit. Don't tell me," Leopold began. "Guys, he doesn't know about glory kill rights." "We can discuss this on the way back. We've lost too much time already, and lives." Scanning through the tactical display and his monitors, Wyatt quickly detected 7 fighters drifting away aimlessly. They were either dead or completely disabled. He hoped the second option was the right answer. Taking them into account, he also was quick to add up the total loss of 5 fighters and their pilots. Another 15 fighters reported heavy damage, but they could still move. The rest presented either light damage to no damage at all. "Raquel, Gregor, "Destroy those fighters, now!" he ordered coldly. Rather than argue again, they obeyed. A quick burst from their coil guns was enough to turn the crippled vessels into mere debris. "Computer, save the trajectory of the 7 drifting friendlies." "Trajectories saved," the AI replied. "If they are alive, they won't activate their rescue beacons yet with the Drazan so close by. They have around 12 hours of emergency life support. That should give us enough time to meet with the Navio and launch a quick retrieval if they are alive," Wyatt thought with mild displeasure. A Raptor fighter's cockpit wasn't made to fit 2 people in it. But during an emergency, it could house another person, although it would be tight and incredibly uncomfortable. Wyatt narrowed his eyes. The Drazan fighters were approaching the limits of his sensors, and he wondered how far behind the frigates were. They needed to leave now, but the idea of leaving potential survivors left a sour taste in his mouth, and he disliked it. "Send trajectories to everyone." "Sent," the computer replied. "To those undamaged and nearest to the marked points, quickly perform an emergency retrieval. Leave the fighter and rescue the pilot if they still live. I know it will be uncomfortable, but I will not leave them here floating for hours when Drazan will likely search for survivors soon," said Wyatt. The situation, urgent as it was, could endure a few minutes if only a single life could be saved. "This is Procyon 2. Pilot is dead. Sirius 5 reporting, pilot secured. Beta 4 here, pilot retrieved. Epsilon 3 reporting there is no survivor. Survivor retrieved, new one out. This is Theta 5, there is no pilot present. The cockpit was completely torn asunder. I'm sorry, Composter 1. Critical condition for this pilot. She won't make it unless we leave now, sir," Iota 3 announced. "That's everyone," Wyatt proclaimed. "Return to your formations and let's move out. We can't afford to give those carrion feeders more time to prepare a counterassault." Taking heed of his orders, the surviving 68 fighters returned to their original destination, eager to rendezvous with the Navio. He could hardly believe that so many of them survived, or that they survived at all. Now, hundreds more of Drazan were dead, even if it meant the loss of 12 pilots. He would not mourn for the 3 idiots who got themselves killed. They acted on their own damn thirst for glory, and it got them killed, much like it had cost the life of Abacus Reed. He only hoped the 3 idiots didn't have older brothers demanding his head be presented as a suitable recompense, but their demise reminded him of a more pressing issue. "Leopold, what are these glory kill rites?" "Allow me to explain," Nultar interjected. "It is as it sounds, honestly. The leader of every group, be them a small team of Marines, ROSF strike teams, or Army squadrons, platoons, cohorts, or whatever else is, well, entitled to receive the glory of a kill whenever possible." "What?" Wyatt uttered lowly, unwilling to believe what he was hearing. "It is more difficult for fighter squadrons to do so, but the same principle is withheld, sir. Squadron members are expected to serve, protect, and aid their leader whenever possible during combat, up to sacrificing themselves for the sake of their leader. It is not a written rule, of course, but it is highly expected to follow the spirit of it. This includes, of course, facilitating the accumulation and claiming of glory, accolades, and prestige through glory kills. It is an honor for us to present you with a target for you to claim as—" "Shut up," Wyatt suddenly said, cutting Gregor off. This never happened during our practice simulations. Why? Is it because they were training routines and not simulated combat trials?" "Yes," Raquel answered. How could you not have known? Personal glory and honor are important, sir. The higher you stand, the brighter the accolades, the greater the rewards you will receive." She paused for a brief moment. Her next words came softer, weaker, defeated. "Yours is more important. That's how things are." Wyatt's eyes widened, and he felt something snap within him. "I don't care about honor or glory. What are they good for if you're dead?" he shouted angrily before punching the ceiling of his cockpit out of pure frustration. "You talk about this disgusting, pointless, stupid practice as if it was as vital as breathing. What good is it for? You talk about honor and glory and prestige all the fucking time, and yet you happily disobey orders just to satiate your hunger to get a taste of it? What does honor taste like? What does glory look like?" "Sir, I think—" Gregor tried to interject, but Wyatt continued regardless. The floodgates had been opened, and he was not ready to stop. "I'll tell you, Undaj! Glory looks like a destroyed fighter. Honor tastes like ash. I can only imagine how many pilots... No, how many people have died over something so immensely stupid. I got close to joining them because you two, Raquel Otilo and Gregor Undaj, wanted to help elevate my glory instead of killing fucking Drazan. Do you want to honor me so badly? Take the fucking shot next time. I don't care who gets the credit as long as the mission is complete and we come back home alive, he breathed out angrily, panting heavily for several seconds before delivering his closing words. If you want to gain glory, go ahead, do it. I won't try to stop anyone else ever again. Go ahead and join Abacus Reed and countless others. Me. I would rather live to fight another day if I can help it, even if it means carrying some meaningless mark of shame upon my shoulders. Keep your precious honor. Drink your rancid glory. You can take them. Victory shall suffice for me. For an eternally long minute, no one dared speak nor breathe too loudly. His anger abated. Wyatt finished in his typical dry but cordial tone. We survived. We managed to beat the Drazan hunting us. And more importantly, we return with 72 lives. He let out a tired sigh. That's my victory. Our dead enemies are worthless compared to that. Noir Navio. Bridge. Commander, our sensors are detecting signatures approaching rapidly. Fighter signatures, Galt Tyrom announced without turning to see the aged Redford Kalin on the captain's chair. Redford took a moment to steady himself for the report he would likely receive. Currently, he wasn't completely linked with the Noir Navio. The strain wasn't a problem, but years of experience were hard to wear off, which translated into competent Royal Navy warship commanding officers taking every moment of respite possible in an active engagement zone. He didn't need it, but it was better to be safe than sorry. He could fully connect with the ship at any moment if something required his undivided attention. Opening a private link with Galt, Redford spoke. Do you have any projected numbers yet? The jamming strength is too strong even for the Noir Navio, but our sensors are detecting at least 15 unique signatures, Commander, Galt replied. Redford grimaced internally, whilst outwardly he remained as stoic and calm as ever. 15. How many vectors have you detected? Can you detect any Drazan signatures among them? Commander, every signature is coming from a single vector, and, if I'm reading this correctly, they are flying in formation. No Drazan signatures are detected among them, Galt replied in mild confusion. It appears our fighters did not scatter. Redford shared in Galt's confusion. Why wouldn't they scatter? Against such an overwhelming force, scattering and hoping to survive would be the most optimal tactic to choose if outrunning their pursuers proved to be futile in the end. With Wyatt as their wing leader, though, he could expect things to go differently. Had he chosen to fight in some measure? That would explain the 15 survivors which, given the nature of their pursuers and their numbers, expecting anything above a 30% survival rate was ludicrous. He wasn't a delusional fool either. Wyatt wasn't the sort to just sacrifice more than half of his wing, leaving them to die so he could escape. Although, truth be told, he couldn't be sure if he'd do such a thing or not. It was evident that he valued the lives of others. He had been far more irritated by the fact that the selfish, impudent actions of one Abacus Reed had cost the lives of 2 additional pilots over any theoretical stain on his record, or Salazar demanding his head as retribution. On the other hand, he was utterly heartless and ruthless when the situation called for it, and, in his own words, he valued his survival above almost anything else. Try as he may, he couldn't read the young man properly in some areas. He was, however, certain that Wyatt had done something to get any survivors at all back to the Noir Navio. Again, in his mind, his strategy was once more altered. He had counted on his wing to take more actions in this battle, but with heavy casualties taken, he would have to adapt and compensate. Lastly, he wished that Wyatt Staples had survived somehow. Commander, may I ask, do you believe Lieutenant Wyatt is among the survivors? Asked Galt, unknowingly giving voice to Redford's thoughts. We can only wait and see, Ensign, Redford replied before closing the link as he took in a deep, calming breath. A tense minute later, Galt spoke again. Commander, our fighters are breaking through the jamming curtain. 18 signatures detected. No, 22, 30, 41, 57. 68 signatures detected, Commander. Make another sensor sweep and verify all detected signatures, Redford ordered calmly, even as he clenched the armrests tightly. Sir, Galt replied, typing commands and connecting with his station. A few seconds later, several of his companions looked at him, nodding. Turning to face the commander, he couldn't hide his smile. Confirmed, Commander. 68 are signatures accounted for. We will be able to establish communications with them in 10 minutes at our current speeds. Have personnel ready at the hangar, pressure suits and sealed armors at the ready, Redford commanded before leaning back on the chair, debating if he should re-establish a full link with the ship or not. After a minute of deliberation, he chose the latter option. There would be no point if he couldn't establish a direct link with his pilots. He couldn't access the network and send Wyatt a private message either. He could only wait and think. Think about how and why 68 pilots had survived against their Drazen pursuers. Ideas, scenarios, and every tactic he knew coalesced in his mind, bringing him no answers and only more questions. While lamentable, he expected no more than 20 pilots to survive against such a force. 30 at most, if Wyatt's uncanny skills proved to be a deciding factor. But 68? How, in Julius's name, had he managed to achieve it? Lost in his thoughts, Redford didn't register the passage of time until Galt called him for the third time. Yes? Commander, we are within acceptable range. Shall I contact Composter 1? Galt asked. Private link, Redford answered and closed his eyes, relaxing on his chair. A few seconds later, the connection was established within the network, and he heard the voice of Wyatt Staples. Composter 1 reporting, Commander. It is good to hear you've survived, Wyatt, Redford replied, allowing himself to break professionalism for a moment. Give me a quick report. Our objectives were achieved, Commander. Operation Weedwhacker was successful, though not to its full extent. The cattle ship won't move and its defenses are severely hampered, but it's not entirely defenseless, Wyatt replied, pausing for a moment. The Drazen gave chase to us in modified fighter craft, Commander. Redford frowned. Modified fighters? Clarify. Their fighters were faster than those previously recorded, but they had slightly weaker shields, Commander, Wyatt replied simply. I will need all video recordings your wing managed to capture, Lieutenant, Redford said, already suspecting what Wyatt was talking about. Continue. The Drazen were gaining on us quickly, Commander. We had no choice but to engage them. The battle didn't last long, and once it was over, we suffered 5 confirmed casualties, 3 of which died due to their own thirst for glory. Another 3 were confirmed dead, and 4 survivors were taken from disabled fighters. In total, 72 pilots are alive and accounted for, Commander, with 8 casualties and 12 fighters lost. Redford was momentarily stunned. 72 pilots were returning, which meant 4 fighters were cramped with an extra pilot on board. And the Drazen? He asked, the question slipping out of his mouth. We engaged the fighters before their frigates could provide heavy support. I can confirm the destruction of at least 340 Drazen fighters, Commander, Wyatt replied dryly. What kind of monster are you, Wyatt Staples? Redford asked himself, astonished by the revelation and wishing to review the battle recordings as soon as possible. One pilot is in critical condition, Commander. The Nornavio is now within sensor range. I request that a medical team be ready to receive her first, said the black-haired man. Request granted, Redford replied. I will need a more detailed report once you arrive. Anything else to report? Only that I spoke out of line, Commander. I allowed my personal feelings to grow out of control, and I made several insulting remarks, confessed the pilot. I shall be the judge of that. Over and out, Redford said, cutting the link. Galt, dispatch a medical team ready to receive a patient in critical condition. 72 pilots are returning. 72? But that would mean at once, Commander, Galt began, only to shake his head and focus on carrying the commander's orders. Several minutes later, Galt spoke again. Commander, we have visual confirmation. Our pilots are decelerating and the hangar is open, ready to receive them. Composter 1 says his squadron shall be the last to enter, as a precaution. And Commander, I'm receiving over a dozen complaints and even a few requests for censorship, all of them directed at Lieutenant Wyatt Staples. Redford frowned. Under what charges? The charges range from and include gross insubordination, overstepping of authority, possible treason, improper behavior, breaking with rules of engagement and honor, and one count of excessive foul language, Galt replied, slightly turning to see the commander's reaction in search for an explanation. Sadly, he found none. Send them to my storage. I shall review them at a later date, replied the aged commander. Before, he was intrigued by what Wyatt said. Now he was curious as to what had been said and done to warrant such a reaction from other pilots. But given the nature of some charges, it was not hard to imagine it. For the moment, he had greater things to worry about and plan for. But first, he had to deal with another beast altogether as a voice echoed in his mind. Redford, am I reading these complaints correctly? Is this filth a poor attempt at a prank? I'm afraid not, Clara, Redford replied, managing to conceal his humor. Barely. It is nothing more than the usual bluster. Let them speak for now. Before we advance, our plan of attack must be revised. I will be present, announced the princess. Certainly. Nor Navio, hangar. Wyatt let out a heavy sigh as the clamp secured his fighter and the hangar closed, being the last to return. He leaned back on his seat, safe inside the sealed cockpit, isolated, alone. I shouldn't have said that, he muttered tiredly. It doesn't matter if I'm a damn blue blood now, I just spat on everything they hold dear. Do I regret it? Not one bit. But I still shouldn't have said that. I should have remained quiet and obeyed. There was a shudder after a few seconds of silence, then he frowned. Obeyed. No, no. If I'm to be punished, then so be it. I won't retract what I said. Obeying is one thing. That was another thing entirely, something forged from pride and stupidity. I will not obey such things. With a final surge of adrenaline-boosted confidence, he gave the command to open his cockpit with a hiss of pressurized air. The familiar sight of the hangar greeted him as the faint sounds of people running around reached his ears. He climbed out of his fighter as it was tended by mechanics, taking in any damage or stress the agile machine of death had undertaken. Most of his fellow pilots had formed in smaller groups, some were being tended to by medics, and only a handful stared at him with disdain or disapproval, which was a surprise. He'd expect much more scorn delivered upon him, but maybe that would come later. What he did not expect to see were the 4 other members of his squadron lined up, waiting for him. Nultar's expression was unreadable. Leopold was trying his best to hide a smug smile. But Raquel and Gregor were both afraid and ashamed in equal measure. An odd sight if he'd ever seen one. He approached his squad mates, unsealing his helmet to feel the fresh air upon his skin. At ease, he ordered upon reaching them. Nultar and Leopold obeyed, but the 2 remaining members remained still, their eyes fixated on him. At ease, he repeated to no effect. We're waiting for our punishment, sir, Gregor spoke first. To his credit, his voice did not reflect the fear that his eyes portrayed. Punish you? Wyatt asked, looking at Leopold and Nultar for an explanation. They displeased you, Wyatt, Leopold answered. It is your right to give them a fitting punishment. Just, within reason. I'm not going to punish you. I was angry. Very much so, I might add. You were doing what you thought was best. It wasn't. It nearly cost me my life. But you didn't do it out of malice. As long as you don't do any of those needless things again in future combats or our training, I can forgive what happened today. Do it again, though, and I'll find suitable replacements. Understood? Said the heterochromatic-eyed man as he stared down his 2 squad mates. I advise that you punish them to some capacity, Lieutenant, said Nultar in a more serious tone. Your position and rank must never be questioned by those under you. They made a mistake in your eyes, they must pay the price. They made a mistake in my eyes? Wyatt asked, eyeing Nultar. Okara, they made a mistake, period. I don't approve of these practices. Glory kills? Such ridiculous nonsense. I never heard about them during the academy. No. Wait. I did. Nothing more than gossip and rumors. I thought there was nothing more to it. Commoners aren't privy to the special and extra classes the nobles take, Leopold answered with a shrug. Can't believe you never got to see them in action before, Wyatt. After I graduated, I spent some rotational duties and patrol duties. Saw little action then, mostly scouting and training runs. Then, when my mandatory tour was over, I was shoved inside a compost hauler, Wyatt replied without shame. Bullshit! They all turned to Raquel, her fear replaced by incredulity and angry disbelief. A pilot of your skill? Of your talent? What you pulled against the Drazen was, do you truly expect us to believe you're a commoner who got lucky one day? Drop the tall tales, Wyatt. Who are you? I'm Wyatt Staples, Wyatt replied, blinking a few times almost as if a realization had struck him. I'm Wyatt Staples, he repeated, with more confidence and a small smile on his lips. He's not lying, Gregor said, surprised. By the stars, you truly are from commoner stock. Told you so, idiots, Leopold barked a little laugh, only for Nolter to elbow him gently. In that case, sir, may I speak with you in private? Gregor asked, while Raquel seemed lost in her own thoughts. With a head gesture, his other 3 squadmates left, giving them ample space to talk. A few moments later, Wyatt broke the silence. What do you need to tell me, Gregor? Sir, I would first like to apologize again for insulting your honor. Wyatt barely suppressed the urge to roll his eyes. Gregor. The slightly shorter man nodded. At first Raquel and I, thought that your chastisement came from a wounded ego, that a man of your skill would not like to get easy kills. Like a hunter, you prefer the thrill of chasing your prey, claiming your trophy of your own accord. Yeah, right. Not even Westgall enjoys the thrill of the hunt. He just kills Clixall because he's damn good at it, Wyatt thought, unsure what Gregor trying to get at. But after your outburst and your confession, Gregor uttered tentatively, it is clear to me that you are merely ignorant of the ways of nobility and how important status, the accumulation of honor, glory, accolades, and recognition truly means. More so now that it is clear that you're the princess's pet. Excuse you? Wyatt said upon hearing the word pet. It didn't anger him too much, for he too considered himself to be a pet or servant of sorts after just meeting Clara and Cynthia. To hear it from another's mouth, however, was another story. I say it with the utmost respect and admiration, sir, Gregor quickly clarified. Your position is one of considerable envy, even if it is at the behest of a princess known for her dark reputation within noble circles. Taking a moment to glance around, he leaned in and said in a quieter tone, You do know her reputation, don't you, sir? That she's called the Reaper. Yes, I know, Wyatt replied, leaving out the fact that it was Clara herself who told him. I also understand the gravity of my closeness with the princess entails. Do you? Questioned Gregor. Sir, you sit in a very privileged position. As such, scorn, envy, and opportunistic guile follow your wake. You are favored and bestowed with gifts that, to many, weren't earned but given due to your position. I must admit, I count myself among those envious of your fortunate ventures, sir. Wyatt crossed his arms. I'm afraid I'm not understanding what you're trying to say to me, Undaj. What do gifts and favors have to do with anything? Groaning in frustration, Gregor raised his left arm. Sir, Wyatt, gaze upon my gear, then upon yours, and then upon other pilots. Wyatt did so, wanting to know what Gregor was talking about. Looking closely at Gregor, he could tell that his suit was far better than any standard issue given to commoner pilots. Even his old armor suit, already slightly better given that he was a warrant officer, was a far cry compared to Gregor's. But the closer he looked at it, the more he could see the wear and tear. Small scratches on his armor pieces, discolored patches here and there, and while good, it was nothing extraordinary compared to the armor he was wearing. Quietly, he looked around and found a greater discrepancy than initially possible. He never paid much attention to the gear of others. Why would he? There was no reason to, but now he could see it. Some suits looked newer, better, others were older and worn down. Then buy better armor, Wyatt said simply, as if stating the obvious. And there's the commoner talking, Gregor said, frowning slightly. Wyatt, do you honestly believe we nobles, just for being nobles, have unlimited funds? You're nobles. I know that some are richer than others, but even the poorest nobles are richer than some of the richest commoners, and those usually work directly under nobles one way or another. So, yes, as far as I'm concerned, nobles have unlimited funds, Wyatt replied, keeping in check his irritation. I will not deny that being a noble comes with great privileges that commoners do not have. In turn, houses must deal with great responsibilities. And among nobles, most of those who join the military, Planet Guard, Royal Navy, Army, or any other branch, are the leftovers, the unwanted, the commoners of noble society. Gregor let out a tired sigh. I joined the Royal Navy because I had no other option to elevate my standing and reputation. I prefer intellectual activities, but as a near-destitute eighth son of a branching house, I am neither affluent nor important enough to be considered for political marriages, important positions within my house's enterprises, or the genius to strike out on my own. It was either this or live in perpetual obscurity. My choice is clear. At that precise moment, Wyatt wanted to punch himself. The words given to him by Clara back in Matcha resonated in his mind as clearly as on that day. All military branches are filled with low-standing, exiled, or fallen nobles because of it, not to mention fourth, fifth, or sixth offspring in branching houses. Competition is fierce because of that, but not the desired type of competition. Worse yet, he also remembered that he would ask his squad mates about it later, but he never did. In the chaos of life that had formed around him, he had simply forgotten about it, pushed it aside as nothing important. He could recall other snippets of conversations and remarks made by others like Redford Galt and even Salazar, but now he realized his mistake. That's why so many are glory seekers, Wyatt commented, almost slapping himself as he dragged a hand across his face. Wyatt? Gregor asked, confused. Wyatt stared at Gregor for long moments, once more judging his armor, and hummed deeply. Gear is expensive, the good kind, he began, and you have to either pay for it yourself or earn it somehow. Gregor nodded. Precisely, sir. Competition is fierce, but there is a certain code to how things work, so to speak. To earn better pay, better equipment, more implants and augmentations, it is imperative to gain as many commendations, prestige, glory, honor, and accolades as possible, in most cases, in the easiest manner possible. Those under someone higher than them will follow, said individual in hopes of receiving some of that glory, and earn some themselves. It all culminates when it is time to leave the military. With a shining enough record of service, then standing within your house shall be increased tremendously. New options for your life will be available. More paths, more power, more influence. It's all a damn game, Wyatt muttered weakly before a pained laugh escaped his throat. It doesn't apply to everyone. There are those who wish to serve or those who enjoy what they do. Some others belonging to powerful, richer houses can afford better equipment easily and, unsurprisingly, higher ranks. Ambition is a powerful motivator. Glory is the honey we all seek to taste. Honor is the coin we trade. Everything else is secondary, Gregor finished with a dark, rueful snort. I see, Wyatt replied before reaching for Gregor's shoulder. Tapping it twice and giving it a firm squeeze, he continued. I don't agree with such views, but I believe I can understand your position better. My equipment was not, however, a gift. I paid for it. Due to services rendered, I was given a reward. I used it to buy it. Gregor blinked. Thank you, sir, for telling me this and for hearing my words. Now, what should our punishment be? Wyatt chuckled, letting go of the man. I suppose not punishing you would stain my honor? Quite so, sir. You could be seen as weak or too soft by others, Gregor replied. Let them, Wyatt said softly. Honor is worthless to me. I seek not glory nor prestige. I told you all already, didn't I? Victory shall suffice. But, sir, think of your reputation, your standing. Any other would... Gregor, panicked, attempted to convince his squadron leader, but failed when he saw his blue and hazel-colored eyes. I'm not any other, Gregor. I'm Wyatt Staples. You won't be punished. But my threat remains. Do something like that again, and I will replace you. Dismissed. Wyatt offered a weak but sincere smile to the shorter man. Gregor fixed his posture and saluted. Sir, he exclaimed, bowed his head in respect and left. Wyatt watched him join the rest of his squad mates for a few seconds until he spotted a familiar Iconti looking around rather agitatedly. Likely knowing what he was looking for, he waved a hand above his head, trying to call his attention. It only took a few seconds for the Akanti to spot him, and in just a couple of long, fast strides, Wyatt was looking down at the eager avian alien. "You survived, Wormbrain. Good tiding. Now give. Data. Before work comes, I need data," Jincho ordered, reaching up with both arms at the taller human. Wyatt let out a chuckle. He truly liked the Akanti, and Jincho had quickly become an odd favorite of his. Carefully, he retrieved a small data chit from one of his pouches and handed it over to Jincho. With frightening speed, Jincho pulled out a data pad from one of his satchels and connected the chit to it. Instantly, the screen was filled with various diagrams, sensor readings, or lines upon lines of data that the pilot had no idea how to interpret. But Jincho could, and his face, filled with excitement, suddenly morphed into one of confusion. He tapped on the screen a few times, focusing on a few sensor readings, 6 to be precise. "Well, ain't that interesting?" "What is it?" Wyatt asked, leaning over the Akanti's head. "These," Jincho pointed at the readings. "Notice anything weird, Maniac?" Wyatt stared at them for several moments, and even he could tell that the readings were a set of 3 distinct matches. "They're pairs?" he answered, though unsure. "Not just any pairs. These 3, he pointed at the column on the left, are the signatures of the 3 Drazen ships that escaped Jintrax. Those same ships are here." "Are you certain?" Wyatt asked, eyes widening. "Every ship gives a unique signature, Wormbrain. You can change it, but that takes time and effort. Dangerous, too. Need to alter the whole damn reactor, and that's bad idea. Very bad idea. Better off buying or making new ship." He tapped on the right column. "Same ships. Kept readings, just in case. If that's the case, you need to show this to Clara and Redford, Jincho." "Come with me," Wyatt said, his pace solid and quick while Jincho followed closely behind him.